Hey everyone, welcome back to the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Dr. Kori Propst, and Kori, our resident health psychologist, is going to help us understand how we can deal with disappointment. We're kind of on this theme, Kori. You keep bringing up these great questions that clients have asked you, and this is a big one because it's painful. I was thinking about this just yesterday. People who get stuck and they feel depressed. It's because something that they thought they had control of, whether it's a relationship, whether it's their finances or career, like something gets taken away, something is lost, and then we don't know what to do. So you're going to help us with that, right?
Yes, I am. I have all the answers, Joe. And I am a human, and I experience disappointment and can sometimes get stuck in it too. But I think it helps to have a way of conceptualizing it and a method for moving through it that can help us kind of alleviate that stuckage place. But I do think it has, there's a difference between disappointment from something that you don't have, you recognize like, okay, this is not in my control, versus something that I did have a measure of control over this and I have some responsibility to take. But I'll say this, most of what I think, my opinion, most of what happens in our lives isn't within our control. So many things. And so part of this, what this person is asking, as I'm kind of wading through this with him, it's really getting at this age-old question that a lot of quotes have been structured around, and prayers and philosophies, and uncertainty is what can cause so many of us anxiety. That seems to be the driving emotion underneath disappointment too, is an underlying sense of anxiety. Like, what did I do? How can I change this? And we've chatted about this in previous podcasts, that, the first noble truth in Buddhist philosophy is that life is suffering. In other words, we can bank on it being dissatisfying. But the second noble truth is that there's a cause to that, and it's the way that we react to it. So this question that came to me from a client, it struck me because it's as if he would or could or should respond differently if the disappointment occurred around something that is in his control. And I'm thinking, okay, let's back up. It's disappointment. Let's get out of what you can or cannot control and just look at it bare bones as an emotion, right? Maybe it feels easier to deal with for some people if it's not in our control, because we can more easily, there's less responsibility or ownership that needs to be taken, and we can just kind of say to ourselves, okay, I can let this go. And then it's easier to move through the emotion. And maybe there's less kind of secondary guilt or shame around the outcome that occurred with that disappointment. But so we have an emotion, and disappointment for most people we would classify as uncomfortable or that's an unpleasant emotion, right? It's not something that we necessarily want to feel a lot of. But I think with all emotions, and you've heard me say this 10,000 million trillion times, Joe, that we need to land on them being welcome. Okay, we have people in our lives who are unpleasant that will never go away, and we have to learn how to live with them. We have to learn how to deal with them. I think we do the same here for this emotion of disappointment. So rather than trying to push it away or ignore it, we can acknowledge that it's here. We can perceive it and look at it as, okay, this belongs in the larger landscape of our lives. As he and I engaged in this conversation, he was like, oh my gosh, that's totally what I've been doing. I've been trying to get away from it, like extract it from my life, like push it away, shove it under the rug, and because I don't want it to exist. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to live with this. But I think if we can perceive it as like, I'm the ocean, and this is a wave. And as far as I know, the ocean doesn't complain when a wave arises within it. I do think that we can live more like that on a daily basis in our lives. So that first step, Joe, that it's just the recognition. Okay, this is here, and I'm calling this sensation that's arising within me. I'm going to call this disappointment. And you may have memories or images or, other times in your life that it feels really reminiscent of something similar. But then the second step is allowing. So we allow it to be here. And in my life, I will kind of quietly, gently ask myself, like, okay, may I be with this? As I'm breathing deeply. And may I be with this it's more an invitation. It's okay, I'll welcome you in here. I don't have to like you, but I'll welcome you in here. It's more an invitation rather than an actual question. May I be with this? Can I be with this? No, I freaking can't be with this right now. And there might be some times when we can't in this moment, when we attempt to welcome the uncomfortable feeling. And it's okay to step out at that time, but then to come back and give ourselves the invitation to come back to it. So again, it's okay, you belong, like every other emotion, pleasant or unpleasant. Okay, you belong. May I be with this? And then and I talked about this in one of my videos on self-awareness, Joe, because this is a lot of it is cognitive so far. It's in our minds, right? We're asking ourselves a question. We're kind of doing a cognitive assessment of what's happening. We literally take the stairs down into the basement of the body and we investigate what's there. And it may feel, this is where we get into the sensory aspects of emotion. What's moving around inside of us? Does it feel heavy? Where does it feel heavy? Does it feel kind of dark or cavernous or damp, achy? We're giving ourselves the space in this moment to actually feel it. Feel the emotion in that disappointment in the body. There may be some pressure somewhere. I'll say, for myself, and probably a lot of people can relate to this feeling too, is what it feels like when you're trying to hold back tears and your throat gets really tight. Like, that's an example of how the body will manifest an emotion and just a change in energy. So something like that might be there, and we just investigate the language of that emotion, because an emotion can't talk. That's the way that an emotion communicates with us, is through the senses. And then there's the fourth step, Joe, and that's to nurture ourselves in that moment, in this space that we are. And if we can kind of expand, like, I'm not this tiny little person and it's only about me. I'm bigger than that. I can hold it. I can be a container for this emotion. And what happens when we do that, if we can open and soften to the emotion, is that often we'll notice that there's softness underneath it. It's kind of like when you're upset and a really good friend or loved one comes up to you and gives you a massive hug, and you just kind of like whoosh like that, and the sense of constriction inside of you dissipates. It just kind of falls apart. I think we need to allow ourselves that falling apart. We let the bricks and the walls that we built and the armor crumble. But it can only happen if we're giving ourselves the space and the chance and the opportunity to allow what's there to be there instead of pushing it away. And one way that I will, do this kind of last step is I'll just really quietly and gently ask myself, what do I need? And what I'm really doing in that moment, Joe, is I'm committing to not abandoning myself in that space. Because I look at, if he had decided, screw it, I don't need to deal with this, and he pushes the disappointment away with anger and gets, kind of rageful, stays in his head, and he's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to say to that person, or whatever it is, whatever story he starts to spin, he's literally abandoning himself in the moment. He's giving his power away in that moment to something that, like he said, it's not in his control, not at all. So what is it that he does have control over? Taking care of himself. So I like to think in terms of relationships, and how so often when, say, two people are in conflict, and John Gottman and his 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So in a relationship, how it can be really easy in conflict to move to defensiveness or stonewalling or criticism or contempt, if it's just, it's gone way too far at that point. But we do the same thing with ourselves all the time. We'll build up a brick wall. Don't want to feel that, not going to feel that. So we get defensive. We stonewall that way. Or we start really talking critically to ourselves in a really harmful way. That's there within us. And sometimes it feels really easy to go down one of those roads and in that direction. But what we really need is that more sort of, some people are really uncomfortable with kind of those softer words like tender or gentle, but how about a more friendly approach? We need that more friendly approach. And so with this client, that's what he's been practicing.
So you answered everything that I would need in the first 15 seconds that you spoke, which is just to say, look, this is normal. As human beings, we do fight for control, and that's very normal. We have to have enough food to survive. We have to have something in our occupation that can pay the mortgage next month. So we constantly, even in relationships, as you brought up, we're looking for a way to create stability. But 90+% of the time, it's just not going to happen. All of your dreams are not going to come true. But I have to say, this was a pivotal decision point in my life when I finally discovered the word expectation. And that if I always expect things to be amazing and go well, I'm going to face a lot of disappointment. I remember working with a psychologist one of the first things we went over is he recognized in me, like, okay, Joe's pretty anxiety-based. He's passionate. Yeah. So he had written a book on anxiety, and his first kind of descriptive illustration with me was what can you control in your life? Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the big things and little things. But one of my favorite quotes, and I'll finish with this, Kori, is simply this, and this is what keeps me away from even needing to go down that road. It's by a modern Greek philosopher. Mm. I hope for nothing, I fear nothing, I am free. And not just as a mantra or quote, but literally understanding that keeps me, every time something goes wrong, I'm like, okay, it went wrong. Let's go do something else, or let's fix it. I just don't suffer from that deep paralyzing sense of disappointment. You do feel the emotion, like, gosh, I wanted that to go better. I wanted that to have a different outcome, but you get back up on your feet so much quicker when you realize this is just life.
Well, I think, Joe, so my immediate, and you've told me this, you've shared this quote with me before, and there was a little bit inside of me, like a little bit of recoil, honestly, because I'm like, I know the value of hope. When people lose hope, that can be not awesome. At the same time, what this quote what it has the potential to do is to bring you right back here, right to the present, because the default mode of the brain is to scheme and to plan and look so far into the future and or go way back into the past. And that's what creates the anxiety. There's no anxiety right here, right now. And so that quote just like catapults you right back into this moment to take action.
Yeah, it's not a nihilistic quote. It's not literally meaning don't have any hopes or dreams. It's I hope for nothing, I fear nothing, I am free. Meaning exactly what you said, that I'm okay if things don't go my way because my entire life is not vested in that one thing.
It's that Viktor Frankl's space. Remember his quote, between the stimulus and the response is the space, and that's where you have the choice, and that's your freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome stuff, Kori. All right, guys, thanks for watching and listening. We'll catch you next time in the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast.
Thanks, guys.